Good morning, Just. My name is Kirsty Dignam and I'm here to do a weekly video on the energies collectively. I'm not going to wear my glasses today. That feels really important to me, that I'm happy with the vision that I have and that I can see the things that I need to see, which feels quite relevant collectively as well. When I was feeling into the energy this week, there seems to be an almost presence of detachment and questioning of this detachment. Now, by detachment, I do not mean that we are not affected by what is occurring around us. I mean more that we take a stand back and truly observe. And that level is going to be different for everybody because, again, we see what it is we need to see, or rather what we can see, what we are able to comprehend in each moment. So when it comes to reading the cards, yes, they have been notoriously known for envisioning the future. I always start to lose my teeth. Seeing the future, but based on this moment. So please bear that in mind with any guidance given today, that things can and do change. And that feels very relevant collectively as well, that things can and do change from what we see them to be in any given moment. And it feels almost like there requires I was going to say tenderness or gentility, but actually it's going to be different for everybody. It's going to be how you see mothering, and it may very well be around how you were mothered. And, you know, we can look back over our childhood and think, well, that wasn't a very positive experience. I perhaps would have done that differently with my own children or whatever. But there are aspects from our ancestors that are incredible gifts. And this week in particular, it feels very much tapping into that energy, almost on a karmic level, to take, I feel that in my chest, to take those gifts forward, to almost use them so that we can experience them perhaps in more of a positive light. So for myself in particular, the current stage of grief that I'm going through is like nothing else I've experienced. And yet, like everything I've experienced, it's almost like I am seeing myself in many different versions, going through many different types of grief all at once. But that there's this overall version of myself that can hold space for all of these different things. And one aspect of that is there are things that I cannot change. My mother has passed. I cannot change this situation. And there is a part of me that almost refuses to use that pain as a reason, not an excuse, a reason to not continue living, to not continue getting on with things. And collectively, there are things that it may feel like we cannot change, but it really feels very poignant to recognize that that isn't a reason to not focus on the things that we can change. You know, I'm getting the analogy of run before we can walk, that parental figure that will always ensure that it's safe enough for us to try walking, it's safe enough for us to try again, knowing that we may fall over, but knowing that that's part of the process. And that feels very associated with the energies this week. It does feel a little bit scattered. And what I'm clearly getting is it's because we're trying to almost figure it out for the whole. Again, bringing it back to that individual energy. What does this transition mean to you? What do you need to bring forward from your own upbringing, your own path, your own ancestry to navigate what is occurring at the moment? So for me at the moment, it's definitely that stronger part of my mother that would be get up and you know, face this and do this. And although there is part of me as well that needs to be held and with gentility, I can also see the relevance of tough love. And that feels like the energy that's coming through this week, almost like that tough love energy. And I don't know about anyone else, but over the last few years, tough love energy has had a real negative connotation. Everything is balance. So there is gentility, but there is also action, and there is sympathy and empathy, but there is also compassion, which is, okay, I can see everything that's occurring here, but, you know, as my mother would say, you're better than that. And that doesn't mean that we're not good enough in any given moment. What that means is see how good we are in every given moment and not just focus on perhaps the areas that we can't change this week. It feels like there's a huge clearing this week in particular. I myself, on Thursday, I'm having a medical procedure that has been ongoing for the last 11 years. So I'm having polyps removed from my own bowel on Thursday, which started around about 11, 12 years ago. And because of endometriosis, or almost a binding of the womb, a binding of the feminine aspect of myself, they couldn't get all of the polyps. Well, now that endometriosis has gone from inside the bowel. Nobody knows why, and yes, it probably was because of a lot of the healing and everything else, but even those beautiful stories, are stories, and I can look back on it and when times are hard think, okay, so you managed to shift that, so you can do this too. But in this moment it isn't poignant for me to go back. It is more about they are finally taking almost what started it all. That feels very relevant for us collectively, that by the end of the week, whatever started all of this that we are going through, and that's going to be individual for each other, but ultimately probably have the same kind of weaving in and out of it. Whatever started this is about to come to a completion. So let me have a quick... A couple of years ago, outside the back of us, we're blessed to have woodland and fields, and the farmer had dug up a big hole in the ground. And when I saw this hole, I immediately heard the words, the maternal wound. And this is something that we've all been talking about for the last few years. And as guided, I placed a rose quartz into the ground and asked for healing for the land, but also healing for this maternal wound. Doing so, a few months later, my husband, his mother passed. So we lost my mother-in-law a few months later. And then they closed the hole over. And, in my naivety, I thought, that's it, that it's done. About 6 months later, they opened up the hole again. And the moment they did it, I just knew that there was still something almost festering inside in relation to this maternal wound. Just like my own body, there was still something in there causing those concerns. And it turned out that that was accurate, and they'd found the original polyps that they couldn't get to. My own mother became sick. Then actually we lost my dog, and then my mother became sick, and these were all women. My own mother became poorly and passed, and I was really, really sure they were going to close the hole back over. I really thought that was done. It wasn't until I was discussing with a good friend of mine the other day about the masculine and about being, embracing every stage of the masculine for its sacredness, even though we may not feel it. So even though we may not feel that certain actions at certain times are for the greater good, and we may feel like, and I'm not saying put up with anything that doesn't resonate with you, including this video. So if I've lost you with resonance, or if you think, oh no, I do not agree, turn off the switch. Turn it off. But we don't always know where things are going. We don't always know where things are going to lead. And something that can seem, really negative and really dark, ultimately can bring to light what needs to be brought to light. This is shadow work at its greatest. This is where we find the true gifts within. And it wasn't until last week I was talking to my friend about the masculine, the sacred masculine, and about embracing each step of our own evolution. We've all, throughout centuries and possibly past lives, because it feels very karmic, done things that we can look back now on reflection and be wiser from, and learn from. But it doesn't mean that those things didn't happen. And it doesn't mean that they didn't happen in order to help us grow. And that's where we get that huge paradox of, being grateful for things that caused trauma, but in a roundabout way where we can see the bigger picture. And that feels really relevant this week with whatever is going on for everybody, to know that these things slow down, happen, cliche as it might sound, for a reason, in order to help us to grow. Now, that's going to open a big can of worms for people. It does with me, knee-jerk reactions. You know, you're saying this happened and there was a reason. You know, what are the reasons behind that? And that's the emphasis. Sometimes it's not always for us to understand. When we try and understand something, what we do is we strip away the very emotions behind it. We strip away the very purity of the energy behind it when we try and understand why we're feeling angry, why we're feeling sad, why we're feeling, you know, a need for justice or whatever. Feeling is enough. You know, sometimes we can get caught in a big loop of understanding why something is happening, and what we're ultimately doing is feeding into this non-acceptance of ourselves in each moment. So I'm not advocating we don't learn from things, but that involves actually feeling them without giving them a reason to almost quieten them down. It feels like a very, very big week if we make it a very, very big week, if we feel into it and address our feelings and actually be with them. The many million multitude ones that we may very well feel this week, that's enough. Holding space for feeling is enough. You know, it's crucial. Yeah, it's crucial to feel what we're feeling. To look at different angles and the whys and the maybes and the hows, absolutely, but not to move away from feeling what we're feeling, which is hard because it can hurt and it can cause pain. But I cannot stress this enough: when we go into the pain, the medicine comes. So with that in mind, oh yes, they closed the hole outside. They closed the hole. Not only did they close the hole when I was talking about the sacred masculine, and another one of my cycles started, which can be quite... Okay, so where are we going to go with this? So I saw a post the other day that the red well, the blood well at Chalice Wells has stopped flowing. And what was written underneath was very much about what would happen if we stopped conceiving as women, as creators. What would happen if we stopped giving birth? And much as the womb is a vital place of creation, an essential part of creation, that's kind of like saying once you go, it makes me emotional, kind of like saying once you go through menopause, you're no use to anybody anymore. You know, you don't create anything, you don't give life to anything, so there's no use. This is a real aspect of next year that's going to come into the forefront. And I've seen it with people like Davina McCall when they talk about menopause, and our need to understand this other stage of creation. There are a lot of myths around menopause of, you know, like I say, becoming an old hag, the crone, but actually at that, and it can feel like that sometimes, but actually at that stage in our cycle, it's not that we don't still embody the maiden, the mother, the crone. We have a fourth aspect to us, which is all of them. So we still have the ability to create, we still have the ability to let go, we still have the ability to bring in new beginnings, but it's almost from a, and this is no disrespect to any of us in the maiden stage or the mother stage or whatever, but it's almost like on a more respectful level of all of those stages in every moment. So I mention this because one, it's coming to light, the menopause is coming to light, and I cannot stress the importance of having a deeper awareness and respect for this, not only in women's lives, but also in life in general, because it does feel like the creative energy has changed. You know, it's not this... I saw the other day another thing about the full moon, and there's no judgment here. Another thing about the full moon, about how full moons are for X, Y, and Z. And then other people disagree and they say new moons are for X, Y, and Z. Ultimately, if you're still experiencing a menopausal, menstrual cycle, you go by your own cycle, not by what's going on in the sky. It's when you go into the crone stage, for whatever reason, if you don't have cycles for whatever reason, that you use the moon, you know, as your guiding archetype. When you're still going through a cycle yourself, you would use that as your guiding archetype, with the moon's support. So for argument's sake, if the moon is at full, You know, it's at that real birthing stage. But if you're in your cycle, you're at that real ending stage. So what's being amplified is endings for you, okay? And the changes that could come. And ultimately, it really, really doesn't matter what point the moon is in its cycle, what point your own cycle is. It really doesn't matter, because what's coming through for next year is the ability to be able to use the one thing that gets affected by these, and that's our emotions. You can have a real intuitive urge to manifest something that might be totally out of sync with your own cycle and totally out of sync with the lunar cycle. But it is about knowing you are many, many cycles in one. And that's coming to the forefront. And we don't need menopause to realize that at any given stage we are in a crone cycle too. Because what that means is a cycle that has done cycles. It means a cycle that embraces all aspects of birth, death, and creation. Okay, and that is coming next year, definitely. We are going to see a lot more about the menopause and things like that. And I mention that because this morning, what I realised, once they'd closed the hole outside, once they'd closed the maternal wound hole in my past, I guess, literally behind me, what they've done is reconnect it to a water source. So we're going back to those emotions, and they'd reconnected it to a well, a constant well of flowing. What happens when we really connect to our emotions? What happens when we see every stage of creation as part of each other? We flow. We don't push when we don't feel like we are ready to manifest something because of the stage of the moon or the date. You know, if it doesn't resonate, it doesn't resonate. We don't hold back when we feel that something is ready to be moved on or passed on or delivered. We create in our own unique flow in regards to connection to where we are here on earth right now, our own mother connection. So they've closed over the hole. This morning I woke up on, I think it's my third cycle. For those of you out there that might find this type of conversation unnecessary or offensive, you're really on the wrong channel, because for you, I mean, because this is where it's at, and we're going to have a lot more of this coming up in the next few years, and it's kind of one of the things that could really aid this evolution, the ability to talk about it. You know, when they connected the well up out the back of my garden, they connected it to blue pipes. We're talking about the throat chakra. We're talking about communicating now about these aspects, these incredible changes and shifts within us, and not just, you know, those that have cycles, but men as well. You know, the male cycle is very much linked to the sun, you know, and really finding your own cycle, really finding your own connection here to who you are and how you create. Really, really valid over the next 6 months in particular. This morning I'd woken up to my third cycle in this month, and it just clicked. You know, I've had artificial stages of menopause through contraception and hormonal control and things like that. But it clicked this morning that actually this is beginning. This is it now. This is, the next part. And that brought up quite a few different emotions for me. You know, there was relief. For all those that have had cycles, there was relief to know that actually the end was in sight, which feels very poignant collectively, that the end was in sight. But I didn't know how long it was going to be. And obviously, based on the irregularity of the changes that were occurring in me, it was like constantly feeling like I needed to be prepared for all scenarios. This is the crone archetype. This is the introduction into the observer, the witness that can look at everything and almost predict and prepare for every scenario. And this is what we're being asked to step into. So not being aware of what's going on collectively, being aware, but also being aware of everything and all outcomes. When we do that, we can hold space for all potential outcomes as creators. So this morning, like I say, I realised I was going into the next stage of a much bigger cycle. which we all are. You know, it might not be ideal, but we're all going into that much bigger stage of a cycle now. And I got into the car and ironically turned on the radio and they were talking about menopause. So really being aware, once we recognise what's going on, seeing that confirmation, but also being aware of our perception of what's going on and having it confirmed back to us based on our perception, really being aware of that this week in particular. So this morning I had to go for a COVID test, mandatory, before I go in for my procedure on Thursday. And I think it's about the 8th one I've had in less than 8 months, really. So I'm now in social isolation. And again, that feels collectively, well, it is, isn't it, what's going on at the moment? Having the mandatory tests, you know, having to be in isolation, not being able to go outside just because I want to have some health care. Obviously, in comparison, nothing in comparison. You know, there are people across the globe that can't go out, that haven't been outside their house for 9 months, and there's these mandatory vaccinations and things like that coming in. But what I want to stress is we are all going through our own version of this right now, and to be aware of that. And how do we do that? By feeling what's coming up and holding space for that. You know, if you're feeling injustice, if you're feeling indifference, if you're feeling peace, if you're feeling things will be okay, if you're feeling frightened, honouring these emotions this week, because it does feel collectively like there's a huge karmic ending coming, and it feels very, very, very important to hold space for the bigger cycle of all these little cycles. So with that in mind, 21 minutes already, I'm going to look at the energies this week. Briefly. Right, energies this week, briefly. And again, yeah, relevant. Just look at things briefly. It almost feels like gut instinct, gut reaction this week in particular could really help unmuddy the waters. I'm all for looking deeper. Everyone knows me for looking deeper into a situation. But what I do find myself is I can look at things from all different angles and eventually come back to the same conclusion, just on a more fulfilled awareness. So yeah, just keeping that in mind. First impressions, they're powerful. They are powerful. Especially with our own emotions. What are you actually feeling? First impressions. Okay. Energy this week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I want to rock backwards and forwards. Saturday, Sunday, overall. So it's interesting because I almost do feel like I want to hold and rock backwards and forwards. Almost like, am I going mad? We're not going mad. A lot of things are falling apart, and you know, best will in the world, we can't always see the bigger reason behind it. For argument's sake, with the healthcare providers in the UK being fired if they refuse to have certain mandatory medications. This isn't a space for me to get into it. I'm not anti-vax, I'm not for vax, I am for choice, always have been for choice. I'm the Lover's card in the tarot, it's everything that I'm about. But these healthcare professionals, having been there myself, will eventually have to apply their skills in different areas. So for me, that means that we're going to have a lot of caring people, possibly within the healing community and the alternative medicine community. Now, I'm not saying that only healers should only be of that nature, but they do have a valuable experience that I personally believe could impact that community right now. The same as teachers. These teachers will, you know, our jobs, we're drawn to them for a reason because they call to our soul. So a lot of people will still continue to teach, just in different settings. So much as a lot of these things are breaking down, it is leaving space for almost an evolution of the services that they provide. Same for us individually. So today, Ace of Swords, really, really, really keeping that clear connection at the moment and letting, you know, what I see here with this card is almost the mind unraveling, but remembering to stay centered and focused. You know, let the mind do what it needs to do. Let the environment around us do what it needs to do. Stick with what is right for you, what connects you to your higher vision, what connects you to your higher self, and let the rest do what it needs to do. And that does mean there will be people being activists. That does mean there will be people holding space for the calm. It doesn't mean one person is doing more or better than the other person. What it means is, thank you, they are doing what they came here to do. We don't come here to do the same as each other. Otherwise, there'd just be one of us, surely. Or we'd all be identical. And isn't that the thing that we're trying to avoid? That people get appreciated for all their differences. So those that are doing what they are here to do may not resonate with what we're here to do, because we're here to do what we're here to do. So really letting everything unravel around you, but just focusing on what you are here to do. So on the Tuesday, we have Three of Swords again, and that's the second week in a row that it's actually popped up. It popped up last week for the Thursday. And this week it's for the Tuesday. And you know, right next to it, you have the Five of Cups. So we're talking heartbreak and we're talking grief here. We're talking endings, yeah, we're talking endings. And in this card, this is the Light Seers Tarot by Chris Ann Donnelly. In this card, you can see it's actually the heartbreak that's causing the pain. I don't know if you can see that clearly. Interesting. Can we see it clearly? Can we see that it isn't actually the outside circumstances? It isn't actually what we think it is that's causing the pain, but it's the heartbreak that's actually causing the pain. It's allowing, thank you, allowing the heartbreak to restrict us. Okay? Allowing the heartbreak to hold us back, stitching up the heartbreak before it's ready to be stitched up. It's not feeling that's holding us back right now. Right next to it, we have the Five of Cups, and it is letting those emotions flow. So this really, really reminds me of the hole in the ground outside and the quartz crystal put down into it. You know, really looking at what may be left in regards to your own mothering, how you care for yourself, or how you view how others care for you, or how you view how you were mothered. You know, how you view your connection to the earth, how you view what is going on in society right now. Really, really looking at that and seeing perhaps where we may be causing unnecessary pain, trying to fix something, trying to make people the same as us, trying to avoid our own feelings. In this card, she's letting them flow, and she knows that that in itself is healing to the earth. I don't know if you can see. So I almost want to pause and wait. Yeah. I wanted to pause and wait then to be able to see the focus, to be able to, and that feels very, I'm going to say it again, relevant, poignant, important, collectively on the Tuesday and Wednesday, to really feel into what we're feeling and allow our feelings to empower us to see what to let go of now. We then have the Three of Cups on the Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, on the Thursday, which I'm pleased to see because it's the day of my procedure. But the Three of Cups, and we're talking about birth here, and we're talking about, look at the light, I just can't stop the light coming in. You know, we're talking about support. We're talking, I'm not even going to hold the cards up anymore. We're talking about support. We're talking about new beginnings here. I love how it's three feminine aspects, so mother, maiden, crone, and then all coming together now, all aspects coming together. And what I can see is, you know, when our mothers carry us, so my grandmother would carry my mother in her womb. My mother's eggs were already formed, which means half of me, my mother's side, was carried in my grandmother's womb. And that's what I'm really seeing here. It's almost like a generational healing, which, wow, I can really take on board Thursday. You know, my grandmother had problems with her womb. My mother passed with problems of her bowel. And Thursday I'm going in to have polyps removed that are affecting my womb from my bowel. So it's like, whoa, there's an awful lot of that going on, and it's definitely down the feminine line this week. To empower the masculine to be able to be held and grow that bit further, because we have that energy at the end of this week. But by Thursday, there is that opportunity of that new beginning now. And, you know, the card I couldn't even hold up to the screen. There was so much light there, so much light there. On the Friday, we have the Six of Cups, and you know, normally this card is very much about childhood, and I love this, how it's got animals on there and that unconditional love and everything else. And what I really see here is almost a maturity, not just in the animals, but in the masculine as well, in regards to our emotions, you know. But yes, just because we mature with our emotions doesn't mean we stop unconditionally loving them. How often do we put that stiff upper lip on? How often do we berate ourselves for feeling something? And we may not even realize we're berating ourselves, trying to understand something. Much as it helps us to grow, look at where that's coming from. Is it trying to find a reason for what we're feeling so that we can evolve from it? Or is it trying to find a reason so that we can almost placate it, almost push it down and ignore it? Because that isn't really emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is very much about being able to understand that our emotions are information, that they tell us what is going on, and we may not like them, just like we may not like the dog that chews furniture or the child that isn't as well behaved as we would like, but there still needs to be that unconditional love for them. There still needs to be, okay, this is what I'm feeling by the Friday. In particular, because when we talk about the Six of Cups, we talk about obviously inner child, but what we give out, what we get back. You know, 6 is that balance, which is coming next year as well, being a 6 year, that potential for balance. If we don't listen to the very scales that are monitoring that, which is our emotions, that's when we get resentment. That's when we act from an immature trauma or something that's happened to us before, which ultimately restores balance. On the Saturday, we have the Hermit, and you know, this card actually portrays the Hermit as a child. You know, as that innocence. It just feels really important to see that this week, to see our own childlike innocence, to see our own desires of going within as time for that child within us, that innocence within us, those emotions within us. Only then can we truly ground what is going on, because the Hermit is an earth card. Only then, and it's 9, only then can we have this completion, this end of a cycle that's waiting for us. It feels like we're almost there, and it feels like it doesn't need to be as complicated as we may feel it needs to be. It's love. It's just love. And that is the only thing that will repair the 3 of Swords heart. That is the only thing that will unbind us. That's the only thing that will connect us to what we're here to do. That's the only thing that will heal any wounds upon the earth. It helps us to birth in the 3 of Cups, and it helps us keep balance in the 6 of Cups. So finding what you love, knowing that will always be the case, because love is you. It is your connection to your soul. So really connecting to that. And then on the Sunday, we have the 7 of Pentacles. And I just love this because it's almost like the 5 of Cups on the Wednesday. That thing that we've buried, that thing that we've released, by the Sunday starts to take growth. And it's come from the work that we've done with our own hands here, our own connection, the effort that we've put in. We don't often see emotions, something watery, as, that's interesting, I can take that on board, as earthbound, as effort, but it's part of the cycle. So, you know, in the shamanic wheel, we have the north, which is the air and our ancestors and the hummingbird. We then have the east, which is fire and clarity and the bigger picture. We have the south, which is the earth and the serpent and healing. And we have the west, which is water. In the tarot, we have the swords, we have the cups, we have fire, and then we have pentacles. And the last aspect is always earth. You know, what grows physically from that. It needs water just as much. Our seeds need to be watered by our emotions. And if we're not feeling them and we're not flowing with them, we're not watering the very things we're trying to grow. You know, and yeah, it's an important part of the cycle. It's an important part of our evolution. Water is life, yeah, absolutely. Water is life, including our own emotions. So overall, we have the Page of Pentacles here, which reminds me I am going to start yoga this week. So that's a real little thing for me. But, you know, very much staying grounded, staying balanced here physically relies on how balanced we are in respect to our emotions. And what I have seen is there isn't actually a fire card in here, which is interesting because I know we're coming into Sagittarius. I think around about the 4th of December we have a moon in Sagittarius with I think it's a full eclipse. I'm not sure, I'm not astrology minded, but that's what I'm getting at the moment. And it's very interesting that we don't have any fire this week in preparation for it. Maybe it'll all come next week. Keeping that in mind, you know, that could be the one emotion that we're not allowing ourselves to recognize. Passion. When we, you know, feel injustice, it's passion. When we feel love, it's passion. And they're telling me to change the word from passion to spirit. It's our spirit that we're feeling. Okay, so really this week, getting into connection with your true spirit feels very, very important. So, 36 minutes, gosh. Overall, one major arcana this week, and it is the Hermit. The Hermit here, I'm going to show you this card again. The Hermit here, okay, the lamp is actually at the bottom of the journey. She's done the journey and become the very light that guided her. Pick wisely what light guides you forward now, because that's what we're going to become. It just feels like that's all the Hermit wants to say, basically. We then have two sword cards. Again, if we think of the Two of Swords, so we have the Ace of Swords and the Three of Swords together. If we think of the Two of Swords, what's the one thing she's covering? She's covering her heart in order to, you know, have peace with whatever is coming through. I would say not covering our heart this week, but holding our heart, rocking it backwards and forwards, tapping it, nurturing it, but still staying connected to that higher energy that's trying to come through this week. If we stay in just our head, yeah, that's going to give us clarity, but it's not going to help our heart. If we stay just in our heart, yes, that could very well give us pain, but it's not going to give us clarity. So it's about really merging the two together this week, mind and heart united. We then have 3 cup cards. Yes, 3 cup cards, which is birth. 3 speaks of birth. And we have 5 of cups, 3 of cups, and 6 of cups. When we release, we know this now, but when we release what is holding us back, the new can come in. But what this is saying with the 6 of cups is when we release what is holding us back in regards to our views of our inner child, of our emotions, of creativity and the different cycles within that, that's when that new beginning will come through. That's when that birth, that support of all aspects of ourselves, mother, maiden, crone, not just for women, obviously. Apologies, I can't remember the masculine alternative because it feels very important to connect to what's relevant to you this week, and identifying as a woman that it is relevant to me, but not as relevant as mother, maiden, crone. So finding what is the most relevant to you this week, and identifying with that feels very important in order to bring all aspects of yourself together. We then have 2 Pentacles, so we're talking about that balance again, and it's the Page of Pentacles and the 7 of Pentacles. Look at what you have planted and look at how it's growing and what it needs to, I want to go at what it needs to grow. Real emotional intelligence needed this week, real emotional maturity needed this week, and looking at what emotional maturity is to you. We can look back through our childhood and think, well, our parents were this and da 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 da. There's always gifts in there. You know, there's always gifts in there. So my own mother was incredibly strong. And yes, I can see on the one side that strength doesn't always mean stiff upper lip and not letting things get to you. But on the other side, at the moment for me, there are times when I can acknowledge my emotions, I can hold space for them, but they don't stop me from moving forward because I've taken that beautiful gift from my mother. So really finding, thank you, your own emotional intelligence this week. Is there anything else? I mean, that feels like it's... Okay, I want to avoid it, but I'm going to... Yeah, all right. I wanted to avoid it, but I'm going to bring it up. What's been sat at the bottom of the pack? The Wand card. The 4 of Wands. And they're flowing in this. They're dancing with it. They're owning their spirit, basically. And it's ironic that I wanted to avoid it. So watch that this week. Are we explaining ourselves away because we're trying to avoid our own spirit? Yeah, and where does that come from? What are the judgments behind that? Where's the acceptance behind that? Because underneath, final card, we're going to have the World. Yeah, being okay with who you are here on this earth and really connecting to that and accepting and loving all parts of it. No one's saying we have to like it. You know, no one's saying when I wake up in a bad mood in the morning that I like that part of myself, but it's part of me. Yeah, and just if we can do that for ourselves, you know, you have the elemental platonic solids. I don't know if you can see that on this card. If we can embrace all of our emotions for ourselves, the impact that's going to have on everyone else is pretty phenomenal, and the impact on the world is pretty phenomenal. We wouldn't dream of trying to control the air. Yeah, we wouldn't dream of saying to the sun, you're a bit too much. We might have to protect ourselves and our loved ones from getting burned, and the same applies to life. But these things that we feel. If you need to protect yourself or others from it, of course. If you feel out of balance, you know, and you feel more anger than anything else, then that's fire. So really look at your elements. What do I need to balance this? Maybe I need to increase my fluids this week to balance it out. But you can only get that information, that medicine, by feeling in the first place. So it brings me back to my eyes are being drawn to the 6 of Cups and to the image of the child there, and the young animal as well. I was talking yesterday about being pregnant, not myself, but about being pregnant, and how it almost trains you to have children because you are, right, I need to eat now, I need to drink now, I need to sleep now, and like you become not a slave to your body, you listen and you act accordingly. And the same happens when you have children. They need food now, they need to sleep now, you know, and it feels so important this week that once we really connect to our emotions, we get to listen and act accordingly, which is so important this week, to stay in the moment and focus we feel so that we can listen and act accordingly. There's a 5-second rule thing that a dear friend of mine told me once, and it was, if you're thinking about doing something or you're feeling something or you want something like food or whatever, 5 seconds, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up I go and get a drink. You know, and it does feel like, oh God, we have to be in that moment, constantly aware. Yes, heads up, we do, especially leading into next year. Take care, have a wonderful week.